Have you ever seen someone walk into a room, say almost nothing, yet instantly command the undivided attention of every single person present? No shouting, no cheap peacocking, no desperate attempts to flex wealth or status. Just an invisible, magnetic aura that pulls people toward them like a force of gravity. They possess a terrifying calm that makes loud, arrogant people suddenly feel small, insecure, and foolish. What is this mysterious psychological frequency? Why do certain human beings naturally radiate an authority so heavy that people instinctively look to them when crisis strikes? And how did ancient Stoic sages unlock a quiet magnetism so powerful that emperors, warlords, and entire nations bowed to their presence without a single drop of blood being spilled? Stick with me, because what you are about to discover isn't about fake body language tricks or superficial social tactics. It is about a radical internal transformation, and once you master these silent habits, you will never have to beg for attention or respect ever again. To understand the secret of quiet magnetism, we must look at a man who walked the streets of ancient Athens over 1900 years ago. His name was Demonax. Demonax was not a king, he held no political office, he commanded no soldiers, and he possessed no great fortune. He walked through the city wearing a simple woolen cloak, carrying no weapons and seeking no fame. Yet, something extraordinary happened whenever Demonax appeared in public. If a violent street riot broke out among angry factions, Demonax didn't shout or wave his arms. He simply walked into the middle of the fighting crowds, sat down on a stone bench, and looked at them in complete silence. The moment the rioters saw his calm, unshakable face, the screaming stopped. Weapons were lowered. Men who were ready to murder each other minutes before suddenly felt ashamed. They would walk over to Demonax, sit at his feet, and ask him to resolve their disputes. When Demonax entered the public baths or walked into the marketplace, citizens competed for the honor of having him step into their homes. Families invited him to dinner not because he entertained them with jokes, but because his mere presence brought an unshakable sense of peace into their households. When he died at nearly 100 years of age, the entire city of Athens wept, mourning him not as a politician, but as the quiet soul of their civilization. How did a man with no power or money become the most respected figure in an entire empire? Demonax had mastered the first fundamental habit of quiet magnetism, the habit of internal stillness. Look around at the modern world. Most people are in a constant state of frantic, chaotic motion. They fidget with their hands, glance nervously at their phones every 30 seconds, shift their feet, laugh anxiously at things that aren't funny, and rush their words as if they are afraid someone is going to cut them off. Their physical body broadcasts a clear subconscious signal to everyone around them: I am anxious. I am uncomfortable. I am desperately seeking your approval. The Stoics understood that your physical presence is a direct reflection of your mental state. When you master your inner mind, your body naturally slows down. When a quietly magnetic person enters a room, they move with unhurried purpose. They do not make erratic, nervous gestures. They sit still without fidgeting. They do not fill quiet moments with empty laughter or useless chatter. This controlled stillness acts as a psychological mirror. In a world full of chaotic noise, a person who is completely calm instantly becomes the center of gravity in any room. People are drawn to stillness because their own minds are screaming for peace. Let that sink in. Now consider the second silent habit, a habit practiced by one of the most revered figures in early Roman history, King Numa Pompilius. Numa was chosen to rule Rome during its raw, violent infancy. The city was populated by ruthless bandits, warlords, and aggressive soldiers who knew only conquest and blood. They expected their new king to be a loud, aggressive conqueror who would lead them into battle with thunderous speeches. Instead, Numa governed with a calm, unhurried composure that left his generals completely stunned. One afternoon, while Numa was performing a quiet religious ceremony, a breathless messenger ran into the courtyard, pale with panic. The messenger fell to his knees and screamed, "Your Majesty! The enemy army is marching upon us. They are at the gates. What are your orders?" The surrounding generals reached for their swords, their hearts pounding, waiting for the king to panic, shout orders, or sprint to his armor. Numa slowly turned his head, looked at the trembling messenger with complete composure, and said 3 simple words, "And I sacrifice." He turned back to the altar, finished his sacred ritual with absolute precision, and only then walked out to organize the defense of the city. He did not rush his movements. He did not let another person's panic dictate his pulse. His quiet composure infected his generals, replacing their terror with ruthless, calculated focus. Rome defeated the invaders easily because their leader refused to let the storm break his inner rhythm. This is the second habit of quiet magnetism, the unhurried response. When someone asks you a question, when someone insults you, or when an unexpected problem lands on your desk, what is your immediate reaction? Most people react instantly. They blurt out an answer, defend themselves, or gasp in panic. They react like a pinball bouncing off the nearest surface. A quietly magnetic person never reacts on impulse. When someone speaks to them, they take a full 2-second pause before answering. They look the person directly in the eyes, process what was said, and deliver a calm, measured response. That 2-second pause is a massive display of psychological power. It tells the other person, my mind belongs to me. You cannot rush me. You cannot panic me. My words carry weight because they are born from thought, not emotion. When you stop rushing your responses, people naturally quiet down to hear what you have to say. You force the room to adjust to your tempo, rather than adjusting your tempo to the room. Let's step into the third habit, a habit so dangerous to the ego that very few people ever manage to build it. To understand it, we must look at a legendary encounter between 2 men who represented polar opposites of human existence, Alexander the Great and Diogenes of Sinope. Alexander was the ultimate ruler of the known world. He had conquered nations, amassed unfathomable wealth, and was worshipped by millions as a living god. He walked everywhere surrounded by heavily armed guards, famous generals, and flattering courtiers who hung on his every word. One afternoon, Alexander decided to visit Diogenes, a philosopher who lived in absolute poverty, sleeping in a discarded wooden barrel in the suburbs of Corinth. Alexander walked up to Diogenes, surrounded by his grand entourage. Gold glinted off the king's armor, and the crowd held its breath in awe. Diogenes was lying on the ground, enjoying the warm afternoon sunlight. He didn't jump up. He didn't bow. He didn't even bother to stand. Alexander stood over him, smiled magnanimously, and said, "I am Alexander, the great king. Ask of me any favor you desire, wealth, lands, power, and I shall grant it to you right now." Look at what Diogenes did next. He didn't flatter the conqueror. He didn't ask for gold. He didn't try to impress Alexander with his intellect. Diogenes simply looked up from the dirt, shielded his eyes from the sun, and said, "Yes. Stand out of my sunlight. You are blocking the rays." The courtiers gasped in horror, expecting Alexander to execute the philosopher on the spot for such unimaginable disrespect. Instead, Alexander stood entirely still. A deep, profound awe washed over the conqueror. He looked down at the man lying in the dirt and realized something chilling. Alexander owned the entire world, but Diogenes owned himself. Diogenes needed nothing from Alexander. He could not be bought, he could not be bribed, and he could not be intimidated by crowns or swords. Alexander turned to his laughing generals, his voice filled with genuine reverence, and said, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." This is the third habit of quiet magnetism, total immunity to validation. The reason most people lack magnetism is because they are desperate for approval. You can see it in their eyes, in the way they dress, in the way they brag about their achievements, and in the way they nod along to opinions they don't even agree with just to fit in. They are emotional beggars, holding out a tin cup, asking the world to throw them a compliment or a validation coin. People can sense this desperation from a mile away, and it instantly destroys your authority. A quietly magnetic person wants nothing from the crowd. They do not brag about their success. They do not drop names. They do not try to convince you how smart, rich, or powerful they are. They are so deeply grounded in their own self-worth that your opinion of them neither adds to their value nor subtracts from it. When you stop trying to impress people, you instantly become impressive. When you stop chasing validation, people naturally start seeking yours. Now, look at the fourth habit, the habit that turns you into a human vault that people instinctively trust with their deepest secrets. Consider the account written by Pliny the Younger about Euphrates the Stoic. Euphrates was a philosopher who lived in Rome during the reign of Emperor Trajan. Rome was a city filled with loud, dramatic thinkers who loved to argue in public squares and show off their rhetorical skills. Yet, Euphrates drew massive crowds everywhere he went, not by shouting, but by his extraordinary mastery of deep, active listening. Pliny wrote that when Euphrates spoke with someone, he listened with such intense, undivided laser focus that the speaker felt as if they were the only human being in the entire universe. Euphrates didn't look over the person's shoulder to see who else was in the room. He didn't check his surroundings. He didn't interrupt to share his own stories or offer unsolicited advice. He sat in total, quiet presence, absorbing every word, every tone, and every emotion. Pliny noted that people left conversations with Euphrates feeling deeply seen, understood, and healed, not because Euphrates gave long speeches, but because his quiet focus offered them a rare dignity they could find nowhere else in Rome. Think about how rare that is in today's hyper-distracted world. When most people engage in a conversation, they aren't actually listening to you. They are simply waiting for their turn to talk. They are mentally rehearsing their next story, checking their notifications, or judging what you are wearing. They treat conversation as a competition for attention. When you practice the habit of deep, silent observation, when you give someone your total, undivided presence without interrupting, you unlock a terrifying social superpower. You allow the other person to feel heard. Because you are quiet, they will naturally drop their defenses, talk more, and reveal their true motives, their fears, and their hidden desires. You collect all the information while exposing none of your own vulnerabilities. You become a mysterious, comforting presence that people naturally want to be around, even if they can't quite explain why. We have uncovered the first 4 silent habits that command instant respect: physical stillness, the unhurried response, total immunity to validation, and deep, observant listening. But these 4 habits are merely the outer foundation of quiet magnetism. There are remaining master habits practiced by ancient sages that go far deeper into the core of human authority, habits that teach you how to use silence to resolve conflicts effortlessly, how to project an aura of absolute protection that deters disrespect before it even happens, and the hidden psychological trap that destroys magnetism if you try to fake it. Whenever you are ready to reveal these remaining habits and master the ultimate formula for quiet influence, give the word to continue, and we will step directly into the second part. Let's step directly into the next silent habit, a habit so unnatural to modern human behavior that when you display it, people will look at you with a mix of awe and absolute reverence. It is the refusal to ever be insulted. Consider the story of Socrates walking through the noisy streets of Athens one afternoon. A wealthy, arrogant young man who despised Socrates' teachings walked up behind him, shoved him violently into the dirt, and kicked him in the back. The crowd gasps. Socrates' companions rushed forward, drawing their daggers, furiously demanding that they drag the young man before the judges to be severely punished. Socrates slowly stood up, dusted off his woolen cloak, and smiled. When his friends asked why he refused to take revenge or demand justice, Socrates looked at them calmly and asked, if a donkey had kicked me in the street, would I drag the donkey to court and demand an apology? Let that sink in. Think about the psychological impact of that moment. By refusing to take offense, Socrates instantly lowered the aggressor to the level of a brainless beast. He showed the entire city that his inner dignity was so far above the petty actions of foolish men that an insult could not even reach him. When someone tries to disrespect you, provoke you, or insult your character, they are testing your emotional boundary. They are trying to see if they can command your mind. The average person gets defensive, raises their voice, and argues back, proving instantly that the insult found its mark. A quietly magnetic person does something far more dangerous. They look at the disrespect, remain completely unfazed, and treat the insult like dust blown in the wind. They don't fight back because they don't need to fight back. Their calm indifference sends a chilling message to the aggressor: your opinion is so small, so irrelevant, that it lacks the power to disturb my soul. Now, consider the next habit, a habit that transforms enemy hostility into total submission without a single blow being struck. In ancient Sparta, the legendary lawgiver Lycurgus was proposing new laws that angered the wealthy elite. A violent riot erupted in the public square. A hot-headed young aristocrat named Alcindor attacked Lycurgus with a heavy wooden staff, striking him directly in the face and permanently blinding him in his left eye. The citizens of Sparta were horrified. They seized Alcindor, bound his hands with iron chains, and handed him over to Lycurgus, telling him that he had the legal right to torture or execute the young man for his crime. Look at what Lycurgus did next. He didn't execute Alcindor. He didn't put him in a dungeon. Lycurgus brought the young man into his own home. He freed his hands, sat him down at his dinner table, and invited Alcindor to live with him as his personal attendant. For months, Lycurgus treated the man who had blinded him with quiet gentleness, profound wisdom, and absolute respect. He never mentioned the eye. He never brought up the assault. He simply showed Alcindor, through daily example, what a true, virtuous leader looked like. A year later, Lycurgus brought Alcindor back to the Spartan public square. Alcindor was no longer a bitter, violent youth. He fell to his knees in front of the crowd, wept openly, and declared that Lycurgus had completely transformed his heart. The man who had entered Lycurgus's home as a deadly enemy left it as his most loyal, devoted protector for the rest of his life. This is the silent habit of radical emotional sovereignty. Weak people seek revenge. Strong people forgive. But quietly magnetic people transform the energy of hostility entirely. When someone treats you with malice or jealousy, instead of returning toxicity with toxicity, you respond with an unshakable, generous dignity. You show the world that your character is dictated by your own values, not by the low behavior of those around you. Let's step into the next habit, the habit of extreme verbal economy. To see what this looks like when executed to perfection, look at the ancient Spartans. While the rest of Greece spent days writing long, flowery speeches, the Spartans were trained from childhood to compress massive ideas into the smallest possible number of words, a style of speech known as laconism. When King Philip II of Macedon was conquering the Greek city-states with his massive, unstoppable army, he sent a threatening letter to the leaders of Sparta. The letter read, "You are advised to submit without further delay, for if I bring my army into your land, I will destroy your farms, slay your people, and raze your city to the ground." The Spartan leaders read the long, terrifying threat from the conqueror. They didn't panic. They didn't write a 10-page defense. They sent back a piece of parchment with a single word written on it. If. Philip of Macedon received the message, read the single word, and was so deeply shaken by the quiet, absolute confidence of the Spartans that he chose to march his army somewhere else entirely. When you speak in short, precise, impact-filled sentences, every word you say becomes ammunition. You eliminate the fluff, the filler, and the nervous over-explanations that destroy authority. People will hang on your words because they know you never waste their time with cheap noise. Now consider the habit of unyielding consistency. Most people are wildly unpredictable. On Monday, they are motivated, kind, and focused. On Wednesday, they are moody, distant, and stressed. On Friday, they are chaotic. You never know which version of them is going to walk through the door, which makes it impossible for people to trust or rely on them. A quietly magnetic person is the absolute anchor in the middle of a storm. Whether the stock market is crashing, whether the project is failing, or whether the entire team is panicking, their standards do not shift. Their tone remains steady. Their work ethic stays fixed. Their discipline never falters. Think about how comforting it is to be around someone like that. When the world around you is spinning out of control, you naturally gravitate toward the person who remains rock solid, grounded, and consistent day after day, year after year. That consistency creates a protective field around you that draws people in like a magnet. Finally, look at the ultimate habit that ties all these Stoic principles together into a force of nature: absolute authenticity without performance. The modern world is obsessed with performative living. People perform their lives on social media, perform kindness to get praised, and perform confidence to cover up their deep insecurities. But deep down, human beings have a sharp, subconscious radar for fake energy. We can sense when someone is putting on an act, and it instantly makes us uncomfortable. The Stoic master does not perform. They don't care about appearing intelligent, they simply seek truth. They don't care about appearing brave, they simply do what is right. They don't care about looking powerful, they simply cultivate quiet discipline inside their own soul. When you strip away the need to perform for an audience, a profound shift occurs in your spirit. You radiate an aura of absolute honesty, deep peace, and terrifying strength. You become a person who cannot be bought, cannot be manipulated, and cannot be ignored. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to demand attention to be noticed. You simply need to build an unshakable mind, master your physical body, and step into the majestic stillness of your own soul. The world is screaming for leaders who know how to remain quiet. Be that presence. If you are ready to take this internal mastery to the next level and systematically strip away the chaos that is keeping your life out of alignment, do not wait another second. Subscribe right now to the Stoic Path for another video titled, Fix Your Life Back in Order, 10 Stoic Laws That Actually Works. Master your mind, command your stillness, and fix your life today.